Hello, everyone, and we are back with episode 115 of the Vacation Rental Blueprint. We are continuing in our partner profile series with our legal expert extraordinaire, TC. What was the name we provided her with last time that I think since then she's bought some Google AdWords around?
CJ Snazzy Law.
CJ Snazzy Law, a.k.a. the Jude Law Firm or the Jude Law Firm, ladies and gentlemen. Cassandra Jude. Cassandra, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jim?
How was that intro?
I love it.
How was that intro? Did
it
you
was
like it?
snazzy.
Okay.
Very on brand.
We're 4 episodes in with you, so we've had some time to perfect it. But I mean, we could talk at length all day about just the ins and outs of the legal side of operating your business, in this case being the business of short-term rental. And we're going to dive into something today that is going to be possibly divisive for people. So I know you've got a disclaimer, but before we jump into your disclaimer, I just want to add a disclaimer of everyone on this show today. We've all talked. We love dogs. We're animal people. We love animals. My wife is a vegan. Do I get to play that card on this episode? I will. But we all love animals. And we're going to talk about animals within your vacation rental today. But before that, TC, as always, joining us with his co-hosting expertise and his just world-class summaries of our episodes. I mean, I just love that I can say whatever during an episode and he'll just summarize it at the end. So
it's a sickness. It's a real sickness I have.
Sickness, superpower, I don't know.
I love pets so much that I let my pets take advantage of me. That's how much I love
Same.
pets. Just putting that out there right now. They take advantage of me. I let them take advantage of me. That's just the way it is.
I am not like that. They will never take advantage of me. But I do love pets. So before anyone roasts me on this, it's Cassandra, welcome back. 4th in our 4-part series. Hopefully you'll have us grace us with your presence for future episodes because we really enjoy getting this level of insight for our owners and your expertise in this area. So thank you and welcome back.
Thank you. And just for the record, I do allow my pets to take advantage of me, and I love pets. I have more pets than people in my house. But before we kick off, I have to state my disclaimer, as always. So I am a Florida licensed attorney only, and my advice on today's episode does not create an attorney-client relationship. One can be created, but for the sake of this podcast, this is general advice only.
And as with every episode, we will have Cassandra's all of her information in the description of the podcast and the YouTube videos. So if you have further questions and want to engage, she's a great resource, and reach out to her. Today, we've kind of already let the cat out of the bag because this is going to be a pet pun episode, I think. We'll see.
It's going to be a doggone good one.
It's a doggone good one. Pets. I mean, let's talk pets because, again, I feel like in our last 3 episodes with Cassandra, we've kind of kicked each conversation off about here's what we're hearing from owners. Here are things that owners are nervous about or fearful of having to manage. And so they don't want to self-manage. They don't want to have to deal with these things. So they hire a property management company. A property management company, as we've mentioned multiple times, will take anywhere between 20 and in some cases, smaller property management companies may take up to 30% off the top of your revenue, leaving you with 70 to 80 cents on the dollar to operate your entire business with. There's a better way. And self-management, building a strong network of the right partners will pay off more than cover the cost of self-managing and building all of these great networks and systems. Our sponsor, CleaningBnB, one of the many great services out there that help property owners self-manage their property with fully vetted, strong systems and processes as a cleaning company, and really aligned with so many of our owners on doing great business and helping you self-manage your property with confidence and competence. This goes back to having the right resources, in today's episode, legal resources to be able to ask these questions to and get clear, concise answers on. Today it is, should I allow pets in my property? What are the pluses? What are the minuses that I need to consider when thinking about pets? And TC, I know you've kind of gone back and forth on this in the early days, because there's definite advantages, right, to allowing pets in your property.
Yeah, I really struggle with this one because I really do love pets. But, as a business owner, I had to think about all of the guests that will stay in the house throughout the year. And in our family, we have a lot of folks that have pet allergies. And I know checking into a home or a hotel room where there has been a pet, if it's not properly cleaned, those pet allergies can be miserable for the person. So as a business owner, I had to make a choice. Do I go with pet friendly or no pets allowed? And when I thought about the kind of the full landscape of guests that I would have, I went down the path of no pets allowed in this home, just trying to be respectful of everyone. And it's a hot topic, but I think it's one that we will help owners think about today.
And in episode 114, we talked rental agreement, and we talked, just the importance of making sure you are covering your bases in the rental agreement. Just pets in general, Cassandra, I think that's something that if you're going to allow pets, you want to make sure that is represented in your rental agreement in terms of probably damages, potential for damages, and then the potential for extra cleaning.
Absolutely.
Right?
Definitely want to include that in that rental agreement.
And so let's operate this conversation from the perspective of you've chosen TC and my route where we're not going to allow pets in our vacation rental. That sort of lends itself to the major elephant in the room. Oh my gosh, a service elephant. Do you think that's a thing? I've seen a service miniature pony before. I have not seen a service elephant, but service animals, that's what we really want to dig into today, because that's the one, if you allow pets, a service animal is going to fall under that designation, and you have those areas and those cleanings and everything covered under your rental agreement. But if you choose to not allow pets in your property, you may get a guest request that says, hey, I'm very interested in staying in your property. I guess a service animal or an emotional support animal. I guess my question is, is there a legal definition between those two? Like, how should a guest think about being told they have an emotional support animal that's going to be checking in and they have a service animal that's going to be checking?
So yeah, that's a great starting point. So a service animal and an emotional support animal are two legally completely distinctive types. So a service animal can only be a dog or, ironically, a miniature horse. And so the definition, and I won't bore you because the statute is quite long. So there is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal kind of overview. And then because I'm licensed in Florida, there's also a statute. And in every state, there is a statute that discusses service animals, but it's lengthy, it's long. And it basically just means a dog or a miniature horse that is trained to work or perform tasks for someone with a disability. Okay. Then an emotional support animal is less defined. There is less of a definition at the federal level. It's a little bit stronger with state by state basis. So an emotional support animal is just any animal that isn't required to be trained to do work, perform tasks, or provide assistance. A lot of them will provide therapeutic emotional support, like, for example, PTSD, things like that. So they're completely different legally in terms of how you handle them.
And then I think from that standpoint, it's important here, and I don't know why, but when I talk to owners, there is a service animal, emotional support animal for some owners is like a trigger word. Like that, it sort of has the ability to brush away anyone's feelings of responsibility for hospitality. And it quickly becomes this us versus them mentality of, oh, this person, they're trying to pull one over on me, right? They're trying to trick me. Oh, you can buy those vests online. Oh, I can print out a certificate that says my cockatiel is an emotional support bird. And I can do all of that. And they're just trying to trying to get their pet on property. And it's like, my reminder to everyone listening is like, we're still in the service and hospitality space. We still have to figure out, understand the requirements, understand the parameters at play here, but still treat your guests with respect and dignity, and don't necessarily always assume that they're out to just find a way to get their animal into your property. I mean, a lot of these animals do provide a level of emotional support. You mentioned PTSD, as one of those pieces where you're not trying to judge or attack this guest. This guest is, let's assume, reaching out to you because they have a reliance on this animal, and they also want to stay at your property. So it's that question of, if I don't allow pets in my short-term rental, am I required to accept a service animal and or an emotional support animal in my space? And kind of where do I go from there once I understand that answer?
Sure. So it's very hot button issue right now, obviously, particularly because there's not a lot of really good law like that is guiding the process. So generally speaking, federally, like I previously said, federal sets the tone. This is like me dumbing down the law, but it's important to understand it for the purpose for service animals and ESAs is what they're called. So federal is guiding, state is mandatory in terms of what, you use. So the ADA, there is current legislation, current case law pending that almost speaks to the possibility that the ADA does not even apply to short-term rentals. There is a current case in Florida that's pending right now where essentially a service animal was on the home away application, I believe, was declined. And so the issue in front of the court is whether or not the ADA even applies to short-term rentals. Because if you do a deep dive into the Americans with Disabilities Act, there isn't really, it's not defined. Like short-term rentals are always on this weird, like, hotel, landlord, tenant. Like where are we, like, draw the line? So if you're not operating on a platform, I believe like Airbnb or VRBO, you could choose to interpret that in a way that you do not have to take bookings for service animals or emotional support animals. With that being said, several states are very picky, and you want to always follow state law guidance. For the purpose of a service animal, and if we remember, I just said it's only a dog or a miniature horse that's trained to perform tasks for people with disabilities. Airbnb and VRBO and several other platforms require you to follow their own guidelines for that. So even if the ADA may not apply, and like I said, the law is still out on whether or not you even have to comply with that, you still have to follow the guidelines of Airbnb, VRBO, etc. So those guidelines state that you have to allow a service animal to stay if that is what the person requests. With that being said, you are legally allowed to ask 2 questions. The first question is whether the guest requires that service animal because of a disability. The second question is what work or task the service animal has been trained to perform. And at the end, I will read for you what my family's short-term rental uses as a template, because I believe that may help you when you're trying to like navigate this really no real clear guideline. I mean, this is like the definition of why lawyers lawyer. There's gray areas, and depending on the argument, if that person in Florida has a really good attorney that can make a case for Florida service animal law applying to short-term rentals, Florida is going to change. I mean, that's just the reality. So you can ask those 2 questions, but they are allowed to bring in a service animal.
Hey, Cassandra, let me ask one clarifying question. So first, does an owner of a service animal, are they required to notify the owner of the short-term rental property that they have a service animal? Or can they surprise the owner and just show up with their service animal? That's number one. And number 2, could you restate those allowable questions one more time?
Sure. So unfortunately, if you're using the terms and conditions of using the VRBO, Airbnb, short-term rental booking guidelines, they are not required to disclose the presence of a service animal. So it's unfortunate because nobody likes to be surprised. but that is the current guideline for operating on those platforms. The 2 questions you can ask is whether the guest requires their service animal because of a disability. To be clear, you can't ask what the disability is, okay? So it's a yes or no question, because then we're getting into an ESA and emotional support animal, which I'll touch on again later. That's why you're allowed to ask those questions. And then what work or task have they been trained to perform? So you would hope that, they're being honest and they're disclosing to you, I have a disability. Yes, this dog is trained to, help me alert when I have a seizure or something like that, which almost may be too much information, but you understand what I'm saying. You really can't ask them about what their disability is or for papers. That's another thing that I've seen a lot of people ask. Well, can I ask for the official paperwork that you have a disability or that the dog has been trained as a service animal? You really can't. I mean, because you're almost borderline. There's a concern for a discrimination claim. I mean, you want to protect yourself. So those are the 2 questions you could ask.
As a quick follow-up to that, so if the guest is not required to disclose, part 1 of the question is, should we therefore put conditions in the rental agreement? And number 2, if the answer to that is yes, can we put things in the rental agreement like if you are bringing a service animal, the service animal can never be left unattended in the home? And number 2, they are not allowed on the furnishings. I mean, what are the conditions that an owner who is elected to not accept pets, what can they put in that rental agreement with regards to a service animal?
So yeah, first, always, yes, definitely rental agreement. Yes, I would say if you have a service animal, here are the guidelines and we will charge you, because you are allowed, even for a service animal, you're allowed, if they damage or do anything like have an accident, ruin the carpet, you're allowed to keep the deposit or charge the guest for that cleanup. So yeah, so the animal can't be out of control. That's such a subjective term, but if the animal is acting out of control, theoretically, you can extend to the guest. I don't even know how you'd know, right? Because you're not like there. You're not like, hey, like, let me hang out with your dog for 5 minutes. Let me vet him before he's allowed to stay here. I mean, like, but I guess it's like, I'll give you an example, because this is like really what happens. Like, and it's why you need to protect yourself. The dog's outside. It has to be on a leash if it's outside. You are allowed to say, if you're in a public space, they've got to be harnessed, leash, tethered, and not under the guest's control. Like, I'm just holding it. Like, I don't have a leash, right? So if they're outside and you can see them on the camera and they're like barking and about to bite somebody, that would be my definition of out of control. Because what then will spiral is if they bite the neighbor, you could be liable under vicarious liability for a dog bite. So that's an example. And the statutes do provide, they say, you can decline the guest's use of a service animal if there is a risk of damage to you, your property, others, etc. So if the dog's acting out of control, you then at that point would tell the guest that they can either elect to stay there without the dog. You have to offer that, which they're not going to want to do, obviously, because it's their service animal, or you then start the process of them not staying with you. So that's just an aside. Sorry to get off on a tangent. But yeah, put it in the rental agreement. Make sure that you talk about if the dog's out of control, unhousebroken, they can't be left alone at the listing, and that you can also not allow them into areas that are unauthorized. So you can clearly define unauthorized areas. And then, of course, like I previously stated, harnessed, leashed, tethered, and not just being held in a public space at all times. And then you just need to define what happens if they break those rules. If they're unhousebroken, you can tell them that they can either stay there without the dog or not be there. And then you can also claim damages on any of that if there's any kind of issue after they stay.
This is a key learning for me because my rental agreement does not appropriately cover this. I assumed falsely that an owner had to disclose. And if they can't disclose, therefore, many of these conditions should be listed in the rental agreement. I always treated it as something that I would inform once I was notified. But this is a key learning that I'm going to go back now and modify my rental agreement.
I can help you with that as well.
Thank you very much.
I need to put that in.
And I think episode 114, our last episode where we talked about rental agreements, I think that was very helpful for our listeners because it is Airbnb and VRBO, they provide certain coverage, just like in episode 113 when we talked about the insurance coverages, but those are truly supplemental. And every short-term rental owner needs to understand that clearly, that it really falls to you as the business owner to clearly define the requirements and ensure you have the coverage necessary to do business. With the rental agreement, I think we talked in episode 114 about parties or large group gatherings. And by providing that rental agreement, it essentially set up parameters where anyone who is thinking about throwing a party is going to think twice. And as TC said, they have the ability to cancel with no penalty because we want to be supportive of someone who maybe had an intent of use that we're not going to allow per our rental agreement. The question I've had asked of me in terms of service animals is in the rental agreement, you want to be respectful of the owner, but you also are protecting your business. Is just a blanket additional cleaning fee that is separate from any damages? If there is a service animal or ESA, we require an additional deep cleaning fee of X number of dollars post checkout. Adding those additional fees not necessarily dissuade someone from bringing their pet, but it more of creates security for you as a self-managing owner to say, listen, I self-manage this property. I use CleaningBnB for my post-checkout inspection, but also my cleaning company needs to be able to, at checkout, know what they're walking into, because a lot of times I have a checkout later that day. And so the back and forth of a cleaning company going, it smells like dog in here. Like, oh, they let the dog in the pool and it smells like just wet dog in here. There's not necessarily damage, but it just doesn't smell right in here. So we need to, take some additional cleaning. And instead of going the back and forth of, okay, well, now the cleaning company's got to tell us they got to do a deep cleaning. We've got to figure out, do we have time to do that deep cleaning before the next checkout happens later this afternoon? Can you put those parameters in your rental agreement that just say, if you have an ESA or support animal or a service animal, this additional fee is going to apply to you?
So you cannot for service animals, but you can for ESAs, which I've just covered service animals. And to talk about that a little bit more, there are ways to communicate to service animal owners that this may not be the best stay for them. If you're a no pet place, and there are ways to communicate that in a respectful, uniform manner. Both of those things are key to avoid discrimination suits, essentially, is really what you're concerned about at both the federal and state level. For example, I have a template that I'd be happy to share that I've vetted and has been used on Airbnb and VRBO with no issues. It includes the 2 questions. I'd be happy to read it so you can kind of figure out, so I have a short-term rental owner who has allergies, which is ironic, your statement earlier, and I think it's a lot of people have allergies and that's their main concern. So they write the following to every guest, which is another thing that I would consider. When you're sending the rental agreement, you certainly can just uniformly send out information on service animals, okay? Because you're still not discriminating. The standard that the courts use is basically if it's in your normal scope of business practice, if you do this with everybody, you're not discriminating. So as long as you're, uniformly fine. So my other people use the following. So they say in their spiel, they say, there are many pet-friendly housing areas that would make your stay much more smoother and more enjoyable than staying here. Our community association is very strict, as outlined below. Won't go into that because there are, if you're in an HOA or a condo association, there are rules too for that kind of stuff. They write, while we prefer to keep our space animal free because my husband and son stay occasionally in the space and are allergic to dander in the hair of animals. In addition, our private association will fine $500 and immediately evict for anything other than a service animal. Their policy excludes ESA, emotional support animals. Airbnb allows me to ask the following questions. Is the assistance animal required because of a disability? What work or task has the animal been trained to perform? We have strict guidelines for those who wish to bring their service animal. Service animal staying on our property is not allowed to be left alone at any time. That means not even being left alone in a crate. You must take the animal with you anytime you leave the house. That you remain liable for any and all damage caused by a service animal. And they also talk about leashing at all times, and they must be under control of verbal or sight commands that they follow at all times. If their animal's out of control, we'll ask you to remove, and the animal's handler does not, if the animal is not housebroken. And then they talk about walking the dog outside with the fact that indoor piddle pads are not allowed. Because again, that's like that housebroken thing, and you don't want your house to smell like dog pee. And then bringing your own baggies to clean up outside situation. And they also specifically write, which is why I wanted to read this for you guys, just so you can get ideas for what you can send. It specifically says service animals may not be on furniture, sofa, chairs, beds, or counters unless it is specifically needed for your disability. So you can outline these rules, and it's best practice to put it in something like the rental agreement, so you're not discriminating. It's just these are the rules.
And I think the service animal piece of it, I mean, these animals serve a purpose. I mean, I think you and I were talking about, they're service animals that can detect like pre-seizure, right? I mean, there's a lot of useful purpose. And this goes back to, as short-term rental business owners, you need to understand that this isn't an us versus them. This isn't us trying to give you all the steps to make sure that all I need to do is put that I have an allergy. And and that's not what this is. This is about these service animals play an important role in these individuals' lives. And you need to be, understanding of that, but then also make sure in your rental agreement, you have all the necessary verbiage in there to protect your business as well. This gets into a little trickier space, at least for me and my simple mind, is the ESA side of it. The emotional support animal seems to be much more gray area and much more, ripe for someone just bringing their dog because they want to bring their dog and they go everywhere with their dog. That's where I always go back to I think service animal is hugely important. In a lot of cases, emotional support animals are hugely important to these individuals' lives, but it seems like ESA is maybe a little more open to take advantage of. And maybe that's not true, but Cassandra, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on what you said a second ago. Service animals, if they're true service animals, are going to be probably more better behaved in your short term than the guests themselves, actually. So I don't want to this particular person that I helped write that really is allergic and this, so that right. So just to clarify that. Now on the ESA side,
we love dogs. We love animals. Yes.
Dog lover. To discuss ESAs, yes, there is no real guidance. With that being said, that means that unless you are currently, I believe, in the state of New York or California, and this is not me practicing those kind of laws, this is just from my understanding generally, if you're not in New York or California, I believe you're allowed. I know you're allowed in Florida, and I know you're allowed at the federal level to decline the presence of an emotional support animal from a stay. And additionally, you are allowed to charge pet fees, like we previously discussed, TC and I previously discussed about service animals. So you can't do anything that would discriminate in terms of financially just on its face for a service animal to come into your unit. What you can for ESA is first elect to not allow them in at all, or alternatively to charge a pet fee. So those are the two differences. Now, the definition is almost non-existent, so you could run into a situation where there's an elephant or a gerbil or a fish or something. So my other people that I work with that do short terms, they do not allow ESAs at all, just for that reason. And that's where those questions come in, the previously discussed questions where if they require their service animal because of disability, if the answer is no, then no thank you, just not worth the risk.
What are some instances on an ESA, like some examples of an emotional support animal? I mean, when I think of what a service animal, to be very specific, a soldier with PTSD who has that would be a service animal in most cases, or would like PTSD qualify as an emotional support animal? Like where does this line generally stand in terms of what example would there be of an ESA that is something that is useful to the person and not just their pet, that provides them their own support, right?
Yeah, no. So the only line really is that there's formal training. So they really should, I mean, you're not allowed to ask for them, but they go through a training program. So that German Shepherd that helps the soldier that comes back from Iraq with PTSD, for example, it could be either an ESA or a service animal, depending on if it received formal training. Better distinction would be, like I said, the dog that like alerts to seizures, or like your classic example is a seeing eye dog. Like those are like, but I mean, you can like, if somebody's walking, like you can see that on your cameras. I mean, so you would know. An ESA, to give better examples, are just like you can get a certificate online. I mean, like like I hate to be like that, but like the legal definition is an animal that provides companionship, relieves loneliness, helps with depression, anxiety, or certain phobias, but does not have special training. So,
right. And Cassandra, if I'm someone that has a service animal, I'm not required to notify the owner of the short-term rental property that I'm bringing a service animal. But if I am a guest that has an emotional support animal, am I required to notify the owner that I'm bringing an emotional support animal, or can I just show up with that emotional support animal?
So it's the same thing. So that you're not required to disclose legally.
Interesting. Okay.
Even if it's in your rental agreement.
Well,
if you add that you're required to disclose in your rental agreement, how does that work?
Then I would say the rental agreement trumps as long as you're not in California or New York right now. And I'm not practicing those kinds of laws. I always have to say that. I'm not practicing law in New York, California. I just know enough federally about what's going on that like Florida doesn't have rules about it. I can tell you that much. So it's up to you what you want to do. But you cannot ask them anything except the previous questions I've said. It has to still follow the guidelines for disability service animals, just because that's the current standard, okay? So what you'll do is all you're going to ask is whether the dog is, or whatever, the elephant. First off, if it's an elephant, you're good to go. You could just be like, we don't allow those. Now, if it's a miniature horse, that might be a little bit, or a dog, that's where we get into an issue. So you just say, what do you require this animal because of a disability? No. Okay, we don't allow ESAs. Sorry. I mean,
yeah, and again, we mentioned this at the top of the show. I think it's worth repeating. This show really is about the self-managing owner that has elected to be pet-free. Those that have elected to accept pets, they tend to enjoy a higher reservation rate, because folks love to travel with their pets, and short-term rental owners that accept pets tend to be rewarded. They get more reservations because they're very attractive to those folks that are traveling with their pets. This show is specifically addressing owners that have reached out to us saying, I've chosen to be pet-free. How do I handle these two situations? And that's really what we're addressing here. But again, for the owners listening, please know that there are good statistics that show that you will enjoy a higher reservation rate if you decide to accept pets as part of your standard practice.
Yeah, the pet piece of it, and I've TC, just like you, like I've stayed in hotels and Airbnbs all over the country. I've done cross-country trips, and I've even made a couple of those trips with a dog. And it's, the stress of driving in a car across the country with a dog is one thing that I don't wish on anyone. But then also, trying to find a pet-friendly hotel or Airbnb when you're in the middle of America is not the easiest thing in the world. And there was a couple nights there where I'm like, shit, I might have to sleep in the car because I can't find anything that is pet-friendly. And honestly, the last thing I want to be doing is traveling with my dog. But we're moving to Florida, so I gotta get her over here. But I do think that there's a fair amount of stress for animal owners who are traveling with their dog to find a good property, and there's definite benefit to offering that. But there's also the case can be made that, when you're trying to create a highly hospitable environment for guests night after night with, quick turnovers, sometimes that can become a bit of a problem as an owner as you manage your business, because you just don't know what that cleaning company, what CleaningBnB and their team is going to walk into. If there's a 10 a.m. checkout and a 4 p.m. check-in, and you're walking, the cleaning company or the inspectors walking in before the cleaning company going, hey, TC, we got some problems. There's a mess, it smells, there's damage, then now you're impacting your next guest, right? Now you're impacting the next guest stay who maybe doesn't want that residual smell or damage of an animal in the space. So just a lot to think about as an owner.
Yeah, and Tim, we talk to a lot of guests and we hear their stories, and they're very legitimate stories. Hey, we've got a family pet and we've had some bad situations boarding our pet. We just, there's a number of places that we just don't trust to board our pet, and therefore we've elected to travel with our pet. And you and I both know we see a lot more pets on airplanes today than we've ever seen in our past.
Right.
And I think that's another reflection of the fact that families are electing to travel with their pet. So, Cassandra, for those owners that have elected to be a pet-friendly property, is it safe to assume that in the rental agreement, you can still lay out the guidelines and the rules that have to be followed? And if you are a pet-friendly owner or a pet-friendly home, you can also have a cleaning fee associated with that pet, as long as you don't charge that fee for an emotional or for a service animal. Is that a fair way to approach it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Everything but service dog can be charged on. Service dogs are different.
So I could say in my rental agreement that we're a pet-friendly home. There's an additional, I'm making this number up, $500 cleaning fee at the end of your stay, so that we can prepare the home for the next guest. And here are the guidelines that have to be followed. The pet is not allowed in the pool, not allowed on the furniture, and must never be left unattended. So you can be pet friendly, still have guidelines to protect the integrity of your rental, and also charge a fee for the cleaning that has to be done between guests, as long as you outline that that fee is not charged if indeed you have a service animal. Fair?
Fair, but also if the service dog is required for any of the things you just said were not allowed to be done, then they have to be allowed to do those things, which that just follows everything else. But I'm just like, I'm a stickler, so I'm like,
yep. That's a very, very good follow-up. So it's this is an area where I definitely will need your guidance on how do we structure this in the rental agreement, because we're not trying to be anything more than supportive of all of our guests, and having the right language is really critical.
Yep, agree.
So I'm hearing there's one specific owner that I talk to regularly that I'm just hearing their question pop up, and based on our conversation, if they do allow pets and they charge a cleaning fee for the pet, I guess the question is it, and I think it is it discriminatory to the service animal owner to charge the same fee per your rental agreement that you would be charging to anyone who had a pet in the space? So I'm hearing them ask me that question after this episode, calling me up and saying, hey, Tim, heard your episode. It was awesome. Told all my friends about it. Of course I subscribe, but if in my rental agreement, I allow pets and I tell them that they can have a pet on property and there's a mandatory cleaning fee required, if that pet is a service animal, why can I not charge that if it's standard for anyone bringing an animal into my property?
That's a really good question. And I mean, there is
shout out to Josh, because I know you're going to call me and ask that question.
Nice question,
so there you go,
Josh. So this would be my better solution. I'm not your lawyer though. Remember, Josh, I'm not your lawyer. My better solution would be to build that in to every visit in some way. Maybe that is to spread it out a little bit, so it's like not 500 just for pet owners, but instead 150 for every single person. to avoid any impropriety in terms of a discrimination argument. I think there is no real law, so I can't like tell you, oh, this is what happens. But I think there could be an argument made that you're discriminating against a service dog owner by just charging pet. I know like it doesn't make sense, but trust me, it does. And it depends on your jurisdiction as well.
Well, and I think of a service animal as not a good to have. It's technically a requirement for that individual. Like it's an extension of the human at that point as a service animal in providing that human, that individual, the ability to live, a full life to the best of their ability. And that service animal is an extension. So that in the back of my mind, that's how I'm thinking of it. You have to think of a service animal not as a pet.
Right, exactly.
It is a tool for that human to live a full life, right?
Right, which is why you circumvent any kind of argument about pets when you just do a universal fee, if that's something you're considering. Because I know some people do that when they have pets, a pet-friendly location. They just do a universal cleaning fee. It has nothing to do with whether or not you have a pet or not. And then you just, you work that into your overhead accordingly. And if, and you're creating a great experience. And that's really, what I hope the takeaway is, that like if you decide to have pets, you're creating a great experience. If you decide to only allow service animals, you're creating a great experience in doing that.
Right.
So I think it's time for the recap.
There we go.
So Cassandra, once again, my disclaimer, what I get wrong, please jump in and correct me. So let's start with what we talked about at the top of the show. As an owner of a short-term rental property, you're electing to self-manage, you get to make a choice. Do you want to be pet-friendly? Or if you elect to be pet-friendly, there are good statistics that show you will have a higher level of reservations, and you will be rewarded by those families that want to travel with their pet. That is a clear fact. If you elect to be a pet-free home, then there are certain things that we would encourage you to think about incorporating into your rental agreement, because Airbnb and VRBO require that you accept service animals. So with that in mind, the guest is not required to disclose that they are bringing a service animal during their stay. Therefore, your rental agreement should cover off on that very topic. There should be a section in your rental agreement that clearly defines the expectations around a service animal, such as they can't be left unattended, they can't be out of control. When outside, they should be leashed. And when the puppy dog or the small little horsey does their business, you have to pick up after them. The 2 questions that are allowed should be articulated within the rental agreement as well. And just a reminder to our owners, you cannot charge an exceptional or an up and above cleaning fee for a service animal. Now, on the emotional support side, there is no requirement for the owner to accept emotional support animals unless in New York or California. And then you have the right as the owner to decide how you want to handle that. But again, I'm going to default back to the more of this that can be captured in the rental agreement so that awareness is created on the front end. That's just good for everybody. Cassandra, what did I get wrong there?
Only thing I would add is that there may be other jurisdictions that require ESAs. So always do your research, but that's a simple Google search. You're getting all the information you really need right now from this podcast. And then also with ESAs, you really are only allowed to ask the previous questions for service animals, because technically when they answer whether you require the service animal because of a disability with no, you then know it's an ESA and it's not allowed. You can't ask for papers on any either service animal or ESA. Okay, just so.
Yeah, and the one thing I will call out to our listeners is that if you decide to charge a cleaning fee associated with being a pet-friendly home, I don't believe, I'm going to go back and verify this, I don't believe Airbnb and VRBO allow you to charge for that separately, but I'm going to go back and check. I know you can charge a cleaning fee, but I don't know if there's a box you can check that when you check the I'm bringing a pet, it adds an additional fee. That's going to be something we go back and research because we want to support our owners. But I think that's a question that is worth some follow-up.
I certainly would do that for ESAs if you're allowing them.
Yep. And I think, again, ESAs, like you said, Cassandra, that really requires you do the Google search. You make sure that your area, your jurisdiction, your state, your county, whatever, know the laws and requirements of the place you're doing business. I mean, that's just good. That's just good business practice in general, is know specifically the areas you're doing business in, know what they require, and know how to navigate those areas, and understand that, your rental agreement may have to change based on that jurisdiction. So TC, we've done it again. Another 45, 50 minutes with Cassandra. Cassandra, it's always a pleasure, and we love having you on, digging into these, for our owners especially, these very, at times challenging and confusing areas that sometimes push them to go to a property management solution when one is not really required. And getting them this clarity, hopefully, helps everyone listening. And please, everyone listening, share this episode, share the podcast, subscribe. We'll have all of Cassandra's information in the description of the podcast and the YouTube channel. And as always, Cassandra, TC, thanks for the time, and we look forward to doing it again soon. And Cassandra, hopefully you'll continue to join us. We haven't scared you away from this episode, so excellent. So everyone, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.